Pomerode benze sharamninde namenju subjo dengo jobla janza no rogante so me portin le sambache de tudi yawe yabdo jurjan se sulu no singe jemelo de zo regamsa de menru dambe so remi namjo over dejen kushin de boten de ba yonzin lama ju baraje la.
As this eminent said yesterday, later this evening, His Eminence will be giving the blessing, empowerment of the deities of the mandala of Bardo, and since Bardo, the intermediate state of death and birth, is an imminent reality in our lives, felt it might be appropriate to talk about it briefly. Bardo in Tibetan simply means intermediate or in between, like from one situation to another, from one point to another point. So the time, circumstances in between, from one major point to another, in that sense, Bardo is something completely all-pervasive. There is nothing that is not within Bardo. In that, from the time of birth to the time of death, that the birth as one point and the death as the other point, in between is Bardo, intermediate, in between. And then when we think in terms of much longer time or duration, from the beginning of one kalpa to the end of a kalpa is also a Bardo. So in this way, that all that takes place between such two points is Bardo, the happenings. Then in a more sort of immediate and shorter level is from one moment to the next moment, the time in between one moment to the next moment, which could be just a matter of moment, sort of split second, and that is also Bardo. So from one point to the next point, in that sense. Now here when we talk, so there is nothing that Bardo does not cover. In that sense, Bardo is all pervasive. Right now here, the particular, so there are all kinds of Bardos in that sense. The particular Bardo that we are talking about here, or His Eminence will talk about it briefly, is the Bardo of death and birth. The moment we die until the moment we are born or reborn again. And here, when we talk about death, when I refer to the term death, death addresses a situation of change. Death is change, and is in our experience of our lives, from the conventional point of view, that experience of death is a very serious or is a very big change. Therefore, we therefore make an obvious point of it. Death. Basically, what is it? It is the separation of the material physical body and that of the mental consciousness, separation. When the physical functions of the physiological or the biological system stops, when the body therefore turns into a corpse or disintegrates, and consciousness, mental consciousness, therefore goes separate from the body, that is what we call death. As we have just talked about, the particular Bardo we're going to focus on is the Bardo of death and birth. And in talking about the Bardo of death and birth, once again, when we talk about death, that it means a change, particularly change in terms of, it's like entering from the Holland Tunnel from one end and coming out to the other end. So then you go into another new tunnel and come out to the other end. You see, so it's like, in some sense, while you are going through the tunnel, from the outside of the tunnel, that you are not visible, and that's so the physics separation of body and mind is like going through the tunnel. When you come out the other end, you don't come with a new mind, in that sense, a different new consciousness. So also again, the key point that His Eminence would like to get across here is in connection with habitual tendencies, in connection with the habitual patterns. When we die, that experience of death occurs, there are a number of different ways our bodies are destroyed, basically, diffused in a number of different ways. In some places, countries, it's burned completely, so cremated, burned, and some buried. Nevertheless, the body is somehow, the materiality of it altogether is gotten rid of. And but when we experience birth, as we have, from having passed away and as whatever, but we experience all kinds of habitual tendencies. And the fact that we find ourselves coming up with these habitual tendencies, for instance, egoistic clinging, at birth, and this is not because of the previous body. Previous body has been destroyed, gotten rid of, but you are carrying old habits in that sense. Old habits because it is not a new consciousness. One have died and another new. It's the continuity of the same mental consciousness, and so when we talk about the habitual pattern is mental, psychological. It's from that point of view. So in that way, in order for us to get rid of obscurations of thought, that it is our psychological or habitual outlook that we have developed, that we need to become liberated of, in that sense. Firstly, because of the fact that experience of death is not obstruction, not a total stopping, coming to a complete stop, or obstruction of the consciousness. And therefore death is not to be looked at as something totally negative in that sense. It's not obstruction of the consciousness, that the consciousness will never again happen. Not the total end. And the other also element is the from the point of view, as we have talked about earlier this weekend, how the inherent potential to experience complete awakening, the potential to experience complete awakening is inherent in all beings. And that's another way of saying the consciousness is unobstructed. And the potential to experience awakened, that nature of the consciousness ever present or all the time current. And whether we call it by the terms Buddha nature or the or we call it the all-pervasive luminosity, which is the from the activity point of view, the nature of consciousness. And so the consciousness being the potential to experience awakened mind, also in the case of unenlightened beings, the consciousness, the mental consciousness, is what carries various habitual patterns, and which thus is affected into whatever forms of birth or sufferings in the next birth. And it seems like when we talk about Bardo, between the Bardo again from death to birth, because of we associate here Bardo with death to birth, and it seems that one of the common notion is that Bardo is something negative. Again, the experience of going through the process of the Bardo is also something negative, something which is more unfortunate than right now, for instance, or something that is very fearful, that one very frightening and very awesome in that sense. So you're going to encounter something very frightening and awesome, and a totally absent of freedom. And so we have a lot of negative view about Bardo, that Bardo is something, if you can avoid it, you don't want to go through. Of course, that is if one is able to experience enlightened mind, then there is absence of Bardo anyway. But in generally speaking, Bardo is not necessarily something negative that we go through. For instance, no. There are many different stages or many different phases of Bardo, and it's not like only one phase and one very seriously bad or frightening faces. There are a number of sort of varying faces. And so from that point of view, it's not just one kind of negative thing that you go through. And also from the point of view, right now, we excuse me, just going back. We talk in terms of when we are going through the phases of Bardo, that there is a possibility of experience of liberation, even if we have not experienced liberation while being alive, meaning body and mind together, a living time. There is a chances, a possibility of experiencing awakened mind and liberation during the course of the Bardo, in Bardo. That in itself says Bardo is not particularly only something negative and so, for instance, presently when we experience our lives, our experience of our life is the carrying over into this life of all the habitual patterns of the past life, countless lifetimes, from beginningless time. The fact that we haven't experienced awakened mind is a tremendous, the inconceivable degree of habitual patterns. So we're carrying that into our life. And that carrying over of habitual pattern create tremendous confusion, tremendous obscuration in our lives. Within this lifetime, because of our body and mind and all our sense consciousnesses, and on our end, and because of all the happenings in the phenomenal world we live in, surrounded by, and there is externally constant chaos, constant change, and is constant causes of distractions between the external changing, all the time changing chaotic situation, the influence that such have on our mind in terms of distraction. Because of our tremendous amount of habitual patterns, the combination creates even further obscuration, further chaos. It's like for most of us, our experience of our life is pretty much constantly in the thickest of mist, like thickest of fog, you know, and because of present experience of our lives and past the karmic or habitual carryover into so because there's constant obscuration of fogginess, there is the moment of coming to some sense of focus. Even though, as we talked about, because of the ongoing presence of Buddha nature, or that being our inherent nature, there's ongoing flashes of experience of Buddha nature happening. Nevertheless, because of tremendous fogginess in that sense, and there is no recognition of that. We don't recognize when the flashes of experience of our basic nature takes place. Whereas in the Bardo, then while there is still habitual patterns, but the absence of the material, external, all the various kinds of distractions related to the physiological conditionings, and so there is an experience of, some sense of experience of becoming more focused. Not absence of habitual patterns, but sense of being more focused. Some sense of being more fresh or less foggy in that sense. And then chances of being able to relate to the flashes of experience and recognize. So let's say we have done whatever practice of the Dharma within this lifetime, and that didn't really result into definite powerful experience within this lifetime. Nevertheless, things have become more focused in the course of the Bardo, and therefore practice experience become more fresh, or comes up with some kind of freshness to it, and so possibility of liberation at such times. During the course of the Bardo, from the moment of death until next rebirth, there are constant, because of the different phases of the Bardo, there are numerous times or opportunities to be able to recognize the nature of one's mind from the point of view of nature of one's mind, or from the point of view of pure outlook, based on different practices and different instructions that one has received. So there are a number of opportunities for enlightenment during the course of the Bardo, and we generally talk in terms of the three main phases of the Bardo, or the three Bardos, and in the various different phases. So the first one is the Bardo of dying, that the moment of death, the Bardo which is connected with the moment of death, which is when the process of actually dying is happening, where all the essence of the elements, the physiological elements, becomes contracted, not dispersing, but becomes contracted or concentrated, become concentrated, and also all the emotional and psychological activity of the mind and consciousness, also the activity becomes concentrated, and so the activity thus will begin to manifest more as one goes further into experiencing the future life. And more on the physical level, we talk in terms of the elemental vitality, so that one has received from one's parents, father and mother, also becoming contracted, and so the contraction, or rather the concentration, from all over the body, and contraction and the concentration all from the crown downwards, from the feet upwards, the concentration of the vital energies, if you would, of the body. This is the physical, as well as the mental consciousness. Then this gives rise to a sort of potent force, and that is allowing one to have the experience of basic luminous nature of mind, fundamental or basic luminous nature of mind, and what is commonly known as a clear light experience, an experience of clear light, which is another way of saying, and the experience into the nature of mind. Now, this could happen mainly because previous to this experience of death, the process of dying, one had, as a practitioner,
티 용주도 냠용 강가를 연구요라 봐. 이나야 티 모시에 툼마 툭게 계세라 봐. 다 모시에 ben 냠네 이는 모시에 툼네 다갱알도 모시에 마툼나 되긴알 잔루요라 봐.
So just to clarify, the experience of clear light or the experience of luminous natural mind happens to everyone. Happens to everyone because that is the nature of everyone, and then the concentration of the vital vitalities of the body, or the essence of the elements, it is said. Essence of the elements, of course, takes place for everybody dying. So the experience happens to everybody. There's no one to whom the experience really, under normal circumstances, there's no one to whom the experience does not happen. Nevertheless, if one does not have previous history in one's former life, previous history of instruction, particularly instruction into Mahamudra or instructions that lead to pointing out to the nature of one's mind, and if one does not therefore have some, based on such instructions, do not have some history of practice of familiarizing the nature of one's mind, then when the experience takes place, one does not recognize it as the natural luminous nature of mind, or basic nature of mind, but it is nevertheless a tremendously powerful experience. So therefore, failing to recognize what it is, yet it has this potent force, it affects one, go into some state of shock, and so there may be a number of ways, but basically what's said is that you go into a state of shock or unconsciousness. And whereas if one has history of practice and instruction, then when the experience happens, because of through the practice, when the experience happens, there's some sense of affinity or familiarity. The familiarity allows recognition, sort of a common understanding with your mind taking place. So the experience or the situation that many of you have been exposed to and heard, that certain individuals at the time of passing away, that's the practitioners, that they go into or remain in meditative state, even though all bodily and physical functions have stopped altogether from the biological point of view, yet they remain in meditative state for whatever period of time, number of days. This and remaining in meditative posture, that even though all the physical functions have stopped, yet the body maintaining the tone and everything as if one is completely alive, and that is because there is a recognition of clear light nature or the luminous nature of mind. That experience or insight is that is what is in an outward appearance is remaining in a meditative state. So because of the emptiness nature of mind at during this first phase of the Bardo, the known in Tibetan as Chike Bardo. This is basically literally
sem korangi nelu ting nyamr chandu chik de ta ting manga benga ne te sha yu
in Tibetan known as chike bardo, chike meaning at the time of dying, basically. And so because of the activity of coming into concentration of all the vitalities was talked about. Anyway, so because of emptiness nature of mind, there is the possibility of experiencing recognizing the true nature of mind from the point of view of natural luminosity. And that if one is able to recognize such nature of mind, and then going into such as meditative samadhi, then this is experience of liberation or enlightenment in connection with Dharmakaya experience of enlightenment. Failing to recognize the experience, then, as mentioned, one goes into state of shock or unconscious. When one recovers from the unconsciousness, or from this state of shock, recovers and becomes more conscious, then that from that moment the second phase of the Bardo, another phase of the Bardo, known in Tibetan Chönyi Bardo, the Bardo of Dharmata. During this second phase, one begins to experience of the unobstructed nature of mind, as opposed to emptiness, essentially same, but unobstructed nature of mind. And in connection with that, then there is opportunity to communicate with sacred outlook, with enlightened or pure outlook, expression of the transformation of the five poisons into the five wisdom or the five Buddha, the essential nature of the five poisons, and manifest in the form of the five Buddhas, of the five Buddha family. And basically all the deities of the mandala of the Bardo appearing, but in certain particular way, sequence. Those of you who have studied or read the Bardo third roll, what is called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and so you have some sense of from reading what occurs. Anyway, so as the days, the days, each day the different Buddha appears, and which is not separate from one's own nature of one's mind, not separate from one's own potential five wisdom. And so if you are from previous familiarity with practice, particularly with development stages, meditation, visualization of deity, and in the visualization, of course, explanations are made as to the nature of the visualization, the arising out of the unobstructed nature. And so, when you begin to communicate in that sense with any of the Buddhas, communicate in the sense that it's not anything particularly external. No. But it is looking at the nature of one's mind, appearance of the nature of one's mind from the point of view of enlightened outlook, instantaneous experience of enlightenment. Whether it happens with, first Buddha, second one, first day, second day of the appearance of the deities, any time, just a moment of communication, recognition is, in that instant, experience of enlightenment. So the opportunity is, in that sense, tremendous. So then first the Buddhas appear in peaceful form, And there's 42 peaceful deities in the peaceful form, and then next, again, essentially the same deities of the different Buddha families, same Buddhas, essentially, but to one's experience, the outlook has changed to more wrathful, heroic form.
Salmanga Becha, Tangutan Damanga, then Rimbe ta, teaching the part of the car motion, color car to Yorba, then the drawing of the subject. Tango the Sedan get down manga becha, then Rimjig not so strong. That is of the subject.
So, in connection with the unobstructed nature of mind, or the unobstructed play of mind, that varieties of activity can arise, that is the nature of mind. Because of unobstructed nature of mind, varieties of activity can arise. So the wrathful deities, mandala of the wrathful deities begin to manifest, altogether 58. And but as one goes further to the other side, from death to birth, and the fact of the deities, for instance, having wrathful appearance has becoming more and more difficult to recognize, begin to more and more difficult to communicate with the basic nature of your mind. And the interference, if you would, of habitual patterns beginning to arise in connection with whatever future birth beginning to take place, so things beginning to become more distorted. And anyway, whether in the course of the appearance of the Buddhas or the transformed nature of one's 5 poisons, anytime one recognizes, at any stage, at any point one recognizes any of the deities, and that a true communication, true recognition of nature of your mind, then enlightenment into some Bhogakaya state of enlightened mind. But without previous experiences of working with the Dharma, particularly with the visualizations of the deity, even though again it happens to everybody, there is no recognition. There is experience, but the experience is firstly you see it as something totally external to yourself, and particularly when one's mind becomes more and more distorted, the process continues. The distortion creates fear. Not only something external to yourself, this is more seen from impure, egoistic, dualistic point of view, not only external to yourself, but to very frightening, and so one wants to, in fact, because the possibility of communication is cut off, and there's fear in the place. Therefore, there's no recognition. The face goes without recognizing. And failing to recognize the different appearances of the different deities of the mandala of the Bardo, then the third phase of the Bardo is known as Sipa or Sippe Bardo, and the Bardo of becoming. And during the first phase of the Bardo, failing to clear light or emptiness nature of mind, and going into a state of unconsciousness or shock. During the second phase of the Bardo, not only not recognizing the various peaceful deities, and not recognizing also the wrathful deities from the point of view of their nature. In fact, that since one's view of them is some frightening, fearful external projections of beings of sorts, and anytime when there is experience of any of these deities in the Heroka manifestation, again with the experience going into unconscious, completely overwhelming. See, seeing them as in sort of a more like a demonic or notion, because one's projection of them is coming from so much a confused outlook, and so going into a state of shock or unconsciousness, coming out of it, yet again sort of challenged with another manifestation, and then going into a state of shock, and so it's all coming in and out in this way. And then that phase was over, and then more specifically, so that is leading to the third phase. So the actual third phase is after these two phases are over, then one's mind is in a very confused state. All the possible experience of pure outlook that is arising from the becoming to surface, basically what's happening is the previous the experiences of the past have stopped. The future had not yet come about. No? And so there is this gap situation where one is closest to recognizing one's own nature, but that one missed that possibility. Now one finds in a situation where the past karmic accumulation beginning to come into surface, and the future, or the present rather, also beginning to come closer. So there is a tremendous experience of confusion. Confusion is there is no physical body, but there is a sense of body, mental body, mind-created body, and that is sometimes seemingly that one is in the previous body, one was alive, and feels that one is still alive, and sometimes because one couldn't, there's no response from others, and one is not sure whether one is alive or in that form that one used to be. So there is still a habitual connection to that form. So basically a lot of turmoil here, a lot of suffering, a lot of chaos in the situation, torn between whether one is living. If one, through such connections, experience enlightenment, such that through that vehicle, then Nirmanakaya aspect of enlightened mind. So this just simply going over the three phases of the Bardo, and if one does not experience enlightenment during any of these three phases, then one will experience birth in any of the realms of existences, the 6 realms of existences, according to whatever karmic pattern is most strongest or most predominant, that has would ripen first. One very important point that His Eminence would like to say, and he would think that it's very important for you to remember, to recognize, and in connection with this topic of Bardo, is the practice of the Dharma that we try to pursue in our lives is, while it's important for now, right now, presently, especially if one's practice, one is able to carry out one's practice with a discipline and understanding and perseverance, that it can affect enlightenment, swiftly or within this lifetime. It is of course important. But even if the practice is not going to affect such, the benefit of, because of the future benefit of the practice now is extremely important. So investing for the future benefit, and he approved of that, yes. No, it's because right now, when we are doing the practice, it involves, in the midst of all conditionings, all kinds of habitual hang-ups. It involves effort. For instance, even if you had the opportunity, the good fortune to be pointed out to the nature of your mind, having received so-called Mahamudra instruction pointing to the nature of mind, you have received that instruction, still there is struggle involved in that, to understand that and to pursue that, so that it's natural. It's natural to you. You understand it. You recognize it. Because in the process of the practice, sometimes you have it. Sometimes you don't have it. Sometimes you feel now you recognize it after sort of going through this and that corner of sort, and you got it. But sometimes, where is it? And so it is so much effort involved. Even when you have the instruction. But at the time of the Bardo, the first phase of the Bardo, unconditioned, effortless, spontaneous nature of the mind become manifest. And so free of conditionings, manifest. And one of the very traditional common things, the opportunity for the meeting of mother and son. There's the illustration, the analogy is meeting of mother and son. Your practice is like the sun. The natural, spontaneous manifestation of the self-manifestation of the nature of your mind is like the mother. And when the mother meets son, there is a common recognition. That says meeting of mother and son. And this is like a son recognizes her mother in that sense. So because of the, at the time of the Bardo, because of effortless, unconditioned self-manifestation of the nature of one's mind, there is tremendous opportunity to be able to have a direct communication or experience. Nevertheless, if one does not have, previous to such time, some degree of orientation, no matter how conditioned, but some degree of orientation of working towards a view from the point of view of view. That's okay. and also from the point of view of experience, if some orientation that at that particular time, no matter how spontaneous and how unconditioned, effortless, without some groundwork this way, that one will not recognize. So in this way, the practice presently is so very important for that communication, that again meeting of, using the analogy of meeting of the son and mother, and the recognition of each other taking place. Similarly, right now, when we do the development stages of meditation, the Upadana Karma stages of meditation, we have so much difficulties right now. So much effort. Sometimes we have some part of the visualization going okay, but others are not there. And sometimes it's the whole piece is there, but it's vague. And sometimes we have somewhat a complete visualization, but the characteristics are not there in terms of non-substantial appearance, yet non-substantial. We have a materialistic approach, matter and material oriented to the visualization. So there is so much effort involved in trying to get a good, correct visualization happening. Whereas at the time of the Bardo, again, the unobstructed nature of mind manifests in the form of the deities. And we say in the form of the deities, but they are no other than, it's just for the matter of language. But they are not separate from the nature of one's mind. And so, again, all effortless, all spontaneous. So again, the reason saying that it's not separate from the nature of mind, it's not something we have to visualize, it's not something where we have to say, oh, this is not separate from the nature of one's mind. It is not separate from the very manifestation, experience is not in itself separate from the nature of mind. So again, tremendous opportunity to experience, to recognize the nature of your mind, or the enlightened outlook, and therefore experience. To have an enlightened outlook is to say, have that experience. But if prior to such situations or circumstances, if there is no orientation to the visualization of the deities, the form of one's enlightened outlook, the skillful means, integration of the skillful means, so at that time recognition, as we talked about, has become very difficult. Without some kind of orientation, no matter how spontaneous and how personal, how immediate to you. So the visualization of deity is not to be looked at something unimportant, or because it seems so based on our habitual, cultural, whatever conditionings, seemingly so alien to us, and therefore it is unimportant to us, would be a very serious mistake. Or having the notion, for that matter, well, no, for me, what will work or what is important is just simply look at the emptiness nature of mind. Maybe that is not the best avenue in terms of for you to be able to make that connection. It's like as if you don't have any other alternatives whatsoever. And but here we're talking about something extremely important. It's not just something that is of insignificance. Well, it matters a little bit, but not particularly. But it's a matter of enlightenment. And so, from that point of view, that this issue in terms of practice is taken into account is important. So that's why His Eminence wanted to get this across to you. And so the empowerment that His Eminence is offering this evening is also along this line, that the empowerment may serve as a purpose, as was said yesterday, so some situation of guide, so that that provides some sense of orientation for experiencing the nature of one's mind at such time. And this empowerment is particularly connected with the second Bardo, or the second phase of the Bardo.